On to our final item for this evening. Okay, this item 24 is the Independent Ethics Panel's report of findings of fact and conclusions of law. This is to consider the Independent Ethics Panel's report of findings of fact and conclusions of law, which found no ethics violations arising out of the ethics complaint filed against Councilman Guy Phillips on January 21st, 2020. I want to clarify that although the Ethics Panel report also recommended the Ethics Code be amended, amendments to the Ethics Code are not on the agenda for tonight. City Attorney will be bringing back proposed Ethics Code amendments to the Council to consider at a future meeting. Tonight, the Council options are simply to accept or reject the Ethics Panel's report as submitted, either with or without qualifications. And so...
Mayor, you need to declare a conflict of interest?
Yes, I'm sorry, yeah. How did I miss that? That's because it's not here. Thank you. Thank you for picking up on that. So I understand because of the movement from the consent to the regular agenda, the Councilwoman Cordy wanted to speak first, so please go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. The recent decision by the Independent Ethics Panel allowed several practices with which I disagree and which I believe need to be fixed. And I promise that as member of this City Council, I will work quickly to fix those problems. My intention tonight is to uphold the Ethics Panel's decision as it relates to Councilman Phillips in finding no violations. My concern tonight is with the panel's interpretation of anonymous and personal gifts. First, the panel held that the GoFundMe accounts can be used to collect contributions by anonymous donors in unlimited amounts without any obligation to determine or disclose the names of the contributors. Furthermore, these contributions can be used to pay for the personal and business expenses of council members and members of city boards, commissions, committees, and task force. I do not agree with the panel's conclusions that the identity of the donors makes no difference because the purpose of the GoFundMe account was apparently benign. This reasoning opens the floodgates for unscrupulous elected officials and their benefactors to disguise quid pro quo vote buying as personal gifts. And that is a direct quote from the three-judge panel findings. And for the record, benign purposes is not defined in our ethics code. Second, the panel held that an unlimited number of personal gifts can be made to members of the council and members of city boards, commissions, committees, and task force in unlimited amounts from anonymous sources, and that such gifts do not need to be disclosed. And just for the record, personal gifts is not a term used in our ethics code. Our ethics code provides the gift, and I quote, shall not be accepted if acceptance could be reasonably construed as an attempt to exert improper influence, unquote. If the donors were giving money to Councilman Phillips simply to help for a benign purpose, then why are the donations anonymous? Our code also provides that if a gift is permissible and exceeds $25 in value, then the city official must disclose it to the city clerk. I do not believe that we should be able to skirt our ethics code by accepting anonymous gifts. This is a citizen trust issue. Citizens need to know that their council members and the members of the city's boards, commissions, committees, and task forces are above reproach. Public service is a trust and should not be abused. Secret and anonymous gifts are bad. Transparency is good. The third issue I wish to speak about is the role of the past city attorney played in this process. I don't think there's any secret that Bruce Washburn was involved in this case. Bruce provided pro bono services as disclosed on Councilman Phillips' financial filings, and city's legal staff confirmed Bruce's involvement. Therefore, we must assume that Phillips' response to the ethics panel on April 26th was written by Washburn. And the arguments that we see on personal gifts, anonymous gifts, and gifts received through GoFundMe account were Bruce's words, even though his name is not on them. Washburn's representation of Councilman Phillips, while not legally a conflict of interest, certainly has the appearance of one, and at the very least it reflects poor judgment. The ethics panel identified loopholes in our current ethics code. It called them benign purposes, personal gifts, even though neither of these terms exist in our current code. Our code specifically states that council members and members of the council's boards, commissions, committees, and task force, and I quote from our code, can only exclude gifts from disclosure that are from siblings, grandparents, and other members of their immediate families. Familial gifts would obviously be personal gifts, though the city does not identify family gifts as personal gifts. Additionally, benign purposes or a benign purpose lacks definition in our code also. Are donations made to pay medical expenses benign? Probably yes, though in the case of this GoFundMe account, donations were used to pay non-medical expenses too. Again, I see this as a citizen trust issue. And if this is approved by council, then elected officials can, 1, receive unlimited number of personal gifts, 2, from anonymous donors, 3, regardless of who they are, 4, with no need to identify them, and 5, which are unlimited amount, and 6, without the need to disclose them in financial statements. This violates the trust Scottsdale voters place in their elected officials. To quote Scottsdale's ethics policy, it is a policy of the City of Scottsdale to uphold, promote, and demand the highest standards of ethical behavior from its mayor, members of the City Council, and individuals appointed to serve on the city's boards, commissions, committees, task forces, and other appointed advisory groups. Honesty, integrity, fairness, and transparency of action are the hallmarks of public service in Scottsdale. Use of one's office or position for personal gain or inappropriate influence will not be tolerated, unquote. So with that being said, Mayor, I would like to make the following motion. I move that the council accept the ultimate conclusion of the ethics panel report that it did not find an ethics violation based on, quote, this record and under these ordinances in their current form, unquote. 2, that the council reject the panel's report as submitted because we disagree with the panel's interpretation and analysis related to anonymous and personal gifts. And 3, that a review of the current ethics code by the city attorney be placed on a future city council agenda.
The purpose of this meeting is certainly with qualifications or without, but the only thing that we're here to determine is whether or not we accept the report or reject it. As far as any kinds of changes to the ordinance, that is a subject for another time and another matter. So including it in the motion, I don't believe is correct, and I'll defer to the city attorney on that, but I don't believe that's correct.
Yes, I think item 3 was not agendized to direct the city attorney to bring back changes to the ethics code. It's no matter because I am going to do that anyway. So if you could just revise your motion to eliminate item 3, I think that you would fall within what's properly agendized, and it would be an acceptable motion.
So done.
All right, so the motion then is to accept the findings with the qualifications of your exception to their interpretation.
Correct. You want me to read it again?
Yeah, why don't you go ahead and do
Okay.
it.
Accept the ultimate conclusion of the ethics panel's report that it did not find an ethics violation based on, quote, on this record and under these ordinances in their current form. That was in their findings. And that the council reject the panel's report as submitted because we disagree with the panel's interpretation and analysis related to anonymous and personal gifts, period.
All right, so the rejection is to their interpretation, and yeah, okay. All right. Motion's on the table with the qualifying language, but nevertheless to accept the report as submitted by the panel. Councilwoman Whitehead.
So this is sort of a catch-22. If this motion it does not pass, does this council have the opportunity to make a motion to accept the report without the second qualification?
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
to pull it up. Okay.
Did you get that? You can make an alternate.
Yeah, I would like to make an alternate. Sorry, I don't have the number in front of me. I would like to make an alternate motion that we accept the report of the ethics panel.
Okay. I'm sorry, Ms. Jagger, did you have a comment? No. So it's actually, the first one died for lack of a second. And we have a first motion on the table. Okay, so motion's been made and second with the second.
Second's been made. Yeah, so we're ready for a vote?
Well, and does the second like to speak to it?
We were asked to either accept or reject, so you made a motion to accept, so I agree with that, and I don't think I need to speak to it.
All right.
I accept
the
the
city
report as
attorney
written.
asked, or I've got, no, then we need to get that clear. Councilwoman Milhaven?
Yeah, I would just say that I'm going to go ahead and support the accept, and I do think the ethics code needs clarification with regard to that interpretation, so I agree with everything. But
Well,
but I'm really struggling with how do you accept and reject the same thing at the same time. So I would agree. So I'm going to vote to accept the report, but I do agree that whatever changes we have need to clarify and address that
and I think we're
concern that the second item had.
City attorney working with us on another time and another agenda to work toward that with that information at hand. So, okay. Then I would just say we are ready then for a vote. And, I'm sorry. Are you back? Okay. Go ahead.
Certainly respect everyone's opinion. But what I believe that this does, because we cannot come back quickly enough in a time period within this campaign season that protects our ethics code. And I believe that this finding undermines our ethics code and allows anonymous donors to create a GoFundMe account for any benign purpose for any candidate or council member or mayor or commissioner, and I just don't I just believe that violates the trust of our Scottsdale citizens. My motion exonerates Guy Phillips, but it also I believe it protects the integrity of Scottsdale and our ethics code. And I feel pretty adamantly about that. So thank you.
I understand. Councilwoman, I would just say certainly the report from the judges, the panel of judges, exonerates him. Your acceptance of their report with that qualifying language, I think the fact that it's been stated here, they so much as stated it in their report, but the circumstances of the situation, they found he was not guilty of any infraction of our ethics code. That's essentially what it says. But they also went into the fact that the way the code is written and the counsel that comes through this report is actually telling us that we need to address this issue and clarify it. So I think it's a matter of record. If somebody tries to do something along the lines that you're suggesting could happen, I think we're in the process one way or the other. But I appreciate it, and I'm concerned about your concerns as it relates to an ongoing campaign right now. But that makes it a difficult element all the way around. But in any case, with all that said, and I appreciate those comments and understand, we do have a motion. Are you back on here?
Yeah.
Okay. Councilwoman Clapp?
Yeah, I agree that the city attorney should be working on this, that, I believe we should be addressing anything that relates to anonymous gifts or personal gifts that's been brought up here. But I don't see any good reason to read a report and accept the conclusion, but not accept the way the judges got there. I mean, it's all one report, and they went through their analysis. They took a variety of documents and information and came to this conclusion. So, I'm not an attorney, but I can't separate the way they got to the end and say, well, I don't like the report, but I'll accept the conclusion. That makes no logical sense to me at all. That I have to say that we have to accept the report as it is and move on. We need to let Councilman Phillips move on with his life, because if we leave something hanging, he's going to feel like in some ways he's still under some sort of indictment. And I don't believe anybody intends it that way, but that's the way he'll feel. And so I believe that the judges took into account all the circumstances behind why there was a GoFundMe account established, and it was not secret. People knew about it. And that, yes, nobody ever thought back 14 years ago when this ethics code was put together that there would be an internet with a fund that you could give to anonymously. And so those things need to be addressed now. Times have changed. But to try to isolate the conclusion from the report makes no sense to me. We can be concerned about somebody else can do this. Well, I suppose they could have done this before, and they can do it until we change the ethics code. And we've already said we want to see some things happen to the ethics code. So beyond that, I really don't accept the concept of accepting half of this, but not the other half. I like the report and the conclusion to all to go together as one statement that we accept this report.
Thank you, Councilwoman Clapp. Councilmember Cordy?
Thank you, Mayor, and I promise this will be my last remark on this. To say that I disagree with Councilman Clapp's statement is, well, I disagree. My motion exonerated Councilman Phillips, and he is allowed to move on with his life. Nothing in that statement carries any type of baggage for Councilman Phillips, but it does protect our ethics code, and it protects the integrity of this council and this city, and the integrity that our ethics code holds. And to say that well, we can fix it with a revision. Well, that revision isn't going to happen tomorrow. It's not going to happen next week. It's not going to happen next month. It's going to be a long process, and because and because of that, we are exposing. We are allowing the GoFundMe accounts and anonymous donations, and particularly vulnerable in this current election, and given this current election. I think it's critical that we close that loophole tonight. We close it and move forward with of course, exonerating Councilman Phillips, but also move forward with revisions to that code. You've got to be able to see that this is a loophole that, well, it could be used. It could be used, and by accepting this report and all of its findings, basically gives the blessing by our city council to go create GoFundMe accounts for benign purposes and anonymous donors.
Thank you, Councilmember. I would beg to differ as far as us giving any kind of license on this. We've had this for 14 years, and it hasn't been used in this sense, not only because of the change in technology, just simply by the virtue of and I think it's been pretty well conceded by the attorneys, the judges, the retired judges that are on the panel, that this is a flawed ethics code, and it was not clear. They worked with what they had there. They may have used a word benign, which isn't defined or otherwise, but I think what they were trying to say is that under the circumstances of the lack of clarity, as well as the circumstances of the entire thing, they found Councilman Phillips to be innocent of any unethical behavior. And I'm going to say that I think it's important for us to make the exception, or rather to accept it, as is on the table right now. But I also think we're in the process of looking at a document that probably could have been abused before, but these set of circumstances hadn't come up. I'm not sure if, in fact, we're talking about this as being a pure, complete abuse of a document that is firm and is clear in its compliance issues. So I don't think that we are giving any license, and I don't believe that any license was taken. I think these three retired judges probably did the best they could with the document they had and given the circumstances. Beyond that, I suppose it's a matter of individual thoughts about what you think about what happened in this particular case, and maybe it not being to your interpretation of a document that's not really clear. So I think we've got the motion on the table. I think we've got sufficient conversation on it, and this is not a particularly positive kind of thing that this council ever wants to have to get involved with in any case. And I think, unfortunately, under some political environments, these things get interpreted in different kinds of ways. And frankly, I just would hope that we have ultimately have a good ethics code that's clear and people can strive and, frankly, actually comply with the provisions within it. So. And I think to this point in time, this question hasn't really even come up. I think it's a matter of some circumstances, which the attorney or the judges recognize too. So with that, I think we're ready then to vote. So all those in favor of the motion that's on the table, and that is to accept it, accept the findings as submitted, please indicate by aye, and those opposed with a nay. Aye. The motion passes 5-1, obviously with Councilman Phillips recused and Councilman Cordy opposed. So Councilman Phillips, you can return to the room. The findings of the panel were accepted, and that is the last item of our agenda. I'd ask if there are any mayor and council items you still want to, in view of the other issue. Okay.
Thank you, Mayor. I would like to, for a future agenda, ask the city attorney to come back with a review of the ethics code.
Okay.
At a future agenda.
A friendly amendment. I'd like to amend the motion to ask the city attorney to, while we understand there may be a more thorough review of the ethics code that may be called for, there's a specific concern on the table, and I'd like to agendize staff to bring back a revision to the ethics code that would exclude anonymous gifts at our next meeting. Would that be agreeable to you?
That's a friendly
acceptable?
amendment to yours.
Is that an acceptable motion? Thank you.
Yes, it is.
Thank you.
Okay. Any comments? Questions? I think then we're ready then to vote. All those in favor, please indicate by aye, and those opposed with a nay. Motion's accepted unanimously. And with that, I would offer or accept a motion to adjourn. Second? Second. We are adjourned. Thank you very much. Thank you to the staff and to the city manager and to